Hello, and welcome to our last video in the Christmas knit along with me, Dawn the Stitching Coach, and sponsored by New England Yarn. If you're just joining us, it's not too late to get your kit and register for the cookie decorating party on October 29th. If you don't live in Connecticut, we will have a Zoom option for anyone who can't make it in person. This video will cover our last cookie, the angel. Just like the gingerbread, I'll be knitting the head first to avoid having to pick up stitches later. But if you prefer the pattern as written, that's okay too. Ready, set, knit. Here I have the head already knitted. You'll notice that there's a little curve here that doesn't really look right. That's okay. We're going to be rearranging our stitches later on, and it's going to make the head look correct when we do that. So see how it rounds itself out? So don't worry about this when you cast on if you're using my modification. Casting on using Judy's Magic Cast On, and then knitting the pattern as written. The modification I'm going to be using is adding an extra round to increase so that our neckline matches the cast on for the body and the dress. So right now I have 10 stitches. I need 6 on each needle for a total of 12 stitches. I'm going to put a stitch marker so I know the beginning of my round from the back. Move my yarn and tail out of the way. Get ready for magic loop method. Going to increase 1 stitch. So I'm going to knit 2 stitches. I'll use her make one. Knit the last 3 stitches. Now I have 6 on that needle. Let's do the same on the other side. And now we're ready to start the section on page 7 that's called the body and dress. Once we have the head and we're ready to knit the body and the dress, you're going to knit that just as the pattern states. When you get to round 14, that's where we're going to be rearranging our stitches so that the head looks rounded and doesn't have this little dimple in the middle. I'm going to knit the body and the dress, and I'll meet you back here and I'll show you how I knit the wings. See you back here in a bit. I also wanted to show you, here's how I dealt with hiding the tail of my yarn. I'm going to thread my yarn tail into a darning needle. I learned this method from the Knitting Guild Association. If you notice on the wrong side, you can kind of see a knit stitch underneath those purl stitches. And that little V is here and here. So what I'm going to do is follow this smile. I'm going to take my needle and go under this purl bump and under that purl bump to make a leg of a knit stitch. Pull that all the way out. Then I'm going to follow this purl bump that kind of looks like a frown. And I'm going to go under this purl bump and under the same one at the bottom. Essentially made a duplicate stitch on the wrong side of the fabric. So I've duplicated the tension of the fabric and the stitches. So again, I'll show you that again. Following the smile, going under this purl bump and sort of like at a 45-degree angle. And I'm also sharing that last purl bump here at the top. Pulling that through, make sure that tail comes out. Following the next purl bump and going under this purl bump and sharing the one at the bottom. One last time. Following this purl bump here, going under the one above and to the left, going at a 45-degree angle. It's going to be the same one that this top stitch came into. All of that. And then finish by following and going under those purl bumps to duplicate stitch and match our fabric. If you want to go back under one more time, you can, but I'm just going to clip it here. And then this is not going to put any bulk in the angel's head, but it's anchored and secure enough for what I'm going to be doing. This is not going to get stretched and manipulated too much, so I'm not afraid of this coming apart. If it does, I can always repair it. So now we'll continue knitting the body, and I'll see you back here in a bit. Okay, we're back. We now have our angel profile. We finished the head, the body. We've got the wings on barber cords or scrap yarn, and we finished the dress. On the very last round, you're only going to knit half of those stitches, and we're going to rearrange those stitches. So let me do that first. So I've knit to the halfway mark. I'm going to fold my needles, bring my needles out a little bit, fold this other half that I haven't knit, fold that in half to make sure you have the same number of stitches. Push the cord all the way through. Bring that cord all the way through. And now I can put these on a barber cord. Really make sure those are really nice and snug on the tip of your needle. And if you can't avoid pulling, or if you can't push the barber cord into it, and the only way you can do it is to pull it through, just remember to go gently and pick up those stitches. Sometimes I also like to rotate, but just make sure that you don't yank and pull very hard, because you can and you will end up pulling the needle out of the barber cord. I also kind of give it a little bit of wiggle room by pushing the fabric up towards the needle to give the barber cord a little more room. I'm twisting very carefully into those stitches. Oops, and that last one doesn't want to come off, so I'm going to pick that one up and over, and there we are. That's one side. Now I'm going to do the other side. And now my dress is ready to graft later on. I'm going to leave a significant tail. How much of a tail? I typically will measure and do at least 4 times the length of whatever I'm going to be binding off, or in this case, grafting. So if I go across, that's 1, 2, that should be 4. And then I'm going to give myself at least a 6-inch tail. And then we'll cut that loose. Okay. Now we're ready to reposition our angel. So now she's facing forward and not in profile. Here are her wings that aren't completed. Let's put our needles onto one of the wings. And I'm going to divide these up in half. So right here is where I will pull the barber cord. That would be my halfway point. Okay. Make a U-turn. Okay. Now I have my barber cord off the wing and my needles are on the stitches. Once you have your stitches on your needle, you're going to need to rearrange your stitches. I have done it this way, and you can play around with what way works best for you, but this made the curve the best and allowed me to follow her instructions, which is to put all of the short row on one needle. So when I do this, I'm not going to have the beginning of my round here. I'm actually going to have the beginning of my round in the middle between stitch 4 and 5. But when I do that, I'm going to be able to do my short rows all on the same needle. That's going to ensure that my curve goes in the right direction and that all my stitches that involve short row shaping are all on the same place. So I'm going to slip those 4 stitches. I need to take my marker and place my marker on my needle to show the beginning of my round. She suggests making a slip knot and then passing that over like a bind off. So let's make a slip knot. You don't have to do it this way if you don't like, but if you're following her instructions, I'll show you what that looks like. So now we have a slip knot and we're going to knit across. Oops, not with the tail. That would be a really short knitting project. I'm also, you're going to notice, I'm going to leave my tail on the outside. The reason I do that is because I like to weave my yarn tail in. And if it's inside the wing, it's going to be hard to do that. So I like to let's bring that around to the front, under the needle, take that off that. Bring this around to the front. It also allows me to hold it in place so it doesn't shift around. Up and over. Pull that snug. Replace my marker back on the needle. And now we're ready to do our first short row shaping. Slip, slip, knit. I'm going to wrap the next stitch. And just like I did in a previous video, you don't have to turn your work if you know how to knit backwards. You can purl from the back, from the front, or you can turn your work and purl like normal. Then we're going to slip our marker, purl two together, and then we're going to wrap the next stitch. That around, put a little shawl or a little scarf on his neck, and then knit the next stitch, which brings us back to our marker. Flip the marker over. And now we're going to do our next short row shaping. And you'll notice that I'm not worried about knitting the wraps with their stitch. It's really not that imperative for this particular project. If you want to knit the wraps with their stitch, you can, but it's not necessary. I'm going to turn. Flip that stitch to finish that wrap and then knit this stitch. And now we're back at the marker. So there's another set of short rows that's going to do the same thing. And what that's going to do is start to shape the curve of the wing. But that's essentially it. Once you're done, you're going to weave the tail through the end of the stitches. And next is the last wing and grafting the bottom of the dress. I hope to see you in person or online for our cookie decorating party with all of your cookies ready to be iced and decorated. If you do have questions, leave me some comments in the comments below. You can also tell me maybe what's your favorite modification that you like to do. I tend to modify for seamless knitting and magic loop method the most. What do you do? I'd love to hear your comments. Remember to like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, see you later.